This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on a choice. We're going to mandate. Get it on, and welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. It's Mark Garrigus in New York City. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well. Thank you.
I love to hear that. Where are you traveling? Or you've got some travel plans, don't you?
Yeah, I'm going to Baltimore, and then I'm going to Philly. Philly's tough because it's a Baltimore, so whenever you go to any clubs, there's no vax mandate, so you can just go. There's no ID required. You can just walk in. So the clubs are filled. But if you go to the cities where they have theaters, and, you know, the difference, I don't know if they cut it off at about 500 people, but once it gets above 500, once the venue gets above 500, then a lot of people don't want to show their IDs or their vax cards. And I think it's less that it's not that they're not vaxxed. I think it's a sort of conscientious objector to the showing of it. So it's hard to sell tickets to the theater now, probably depending on who you are as well. But it's a strain going to cities and playing, you know, Chicago, Philadelphia, places like that where they have real strong vax mandate stuff, and then playing theater. So it's kind of, you know,
interesting. I hadn't thought about that in terms of the size of the venue. I wonder if that's a larger sample size or if it's because of the mandate has a break point.
I think the mandate has a break point. It's probably, you know, again, it's somewhere around 500 seats where they go, well, now, I don't know if you could say we run a comedy club with 1,000 seats in it, but it's sort of moot because that doesn't really exist. You know, comedy clubs are, they're 250 to 400. Sometimes there's some that are 180 and sometimes there's some that are 500, but they're generally in the 250 to 375, 400 range, you know, and they're all packed in and no one's wearing a mask, but they serve food. So, you know, it's safe because if you're eating chicken tenders, the disease cannot be spread that way.
Another thing to say, somebody was just telling me that she's got a system that apparently purifies the air, and they're promoting it as a alternative, that if you have this air filtration system, that it will apparently has a great effectiveness against COVID airborne particles, which I'm not sure. I'd love to see if there was any testing done of this or a third party do it. Have you heard of this or systems?
Well, I mean, anecdotally, it's been kind of tested on commercial aircraft because there's been little to no spread on commercial flights. If there was, we'd all know about it. I mean, there is, you know, 200, 300 people packed into an area that's really good for about 60 people. I mean, if you really think about what a commercial airline flight is. I mean, if you think about what indoor dining is or what a concert venue is or whatever, you're not going to get more people in a more confined space. If you really break it down, you know, the inside of a commercial aircraft is, you know, 12 feet wide, 13 feet wide by, you know, 81 feet long or 63 feet long, and you have 250 people in that space. So if it was about sort of proximity to other human beings, you'd think that place would be a vector for transmission, but it is not. I mean, I've not heard a study. I've not heard word one. I've not heard about, you know, a super spreader event because a, you know, plane was flying from, you know, DC to LA and it had 300 people on. I mean, I don't know if you've heard anything. I've heard nothing. I've heard nothing about pilots. You would think that flight attendants
and pilots
right.
are interesting because a flight, they're doing various legs repeatedly Also, you're at presumably 30,000 feet. So the air is being circulated internally just because of atmosphere. So that would seem to be a perfect conduit for, as you said, the vector for everybody. If you had one person who had it, you would think that it would spread to everybody there.
Right. So then the hypothesis is they have very advanced air scrubbing technology on those flights, as they would have to, pre-COVID, obviously. So that's an argument for the air scrubbing. Now, if I know our government, they will at some point mandate that these theaters and clubs have air scrubbers, but it doesn't mean they're going to take their foot off the accelerator in terms of the rules. It'll be one more thing that's just in place, but they'll still do the vax card. They don't, you don't trade with them. You don't go, all right, well, then if we're vaccinated, we don't have to wear the mask then, right? And they go, no, you have to wear the masks. And then you go, but I thought we were going to get vaccinated and then we could take the masks off. And they go, no, masks stay on. We still limit this, and we still safe distance, and we still, push people outdoors. So they don't really, the sort of myth of we could get back to normal if you guys would just do this thing. I don't see any indicators of us getting back to normal, even though people are doing what they're asking them to do.
Well, it's once we've talked about in the past how in California that Jerry Brown, when he was governor, had advanced this kind of tax on high income earners. And he had promised it was going to only last for, I forget the number of years. And he promised, I'm not going to reintroduce it. And so what he did is it was about to expire, is then have one of his political action groups put it on the ballot as a proposition in California, and that enacted it. And I was thinking the same thing as their kind of log rolling in Congress. During the Trump administration, there was the SALT limit, where there was a $10,000 cap on what you could deduct, which would hit states like New York and California very hard. Now, and probably figured into the calculation of a lot of people going to states that didn't have that, and like Florida, for instance, and Nevada. Now they're talking about repealing that, and some of the machinations they're going through are just fascinating. They're saying, well, maybe we'll just repeal it for 5 years and then we'll bring it back. Or maybe we'll repeal it with a higher cap. Or I think Bernie Sanders was making the argument only for people who were over 400 grand. We would keep it in place, and those under 400 grand would still have it. It goes back to your the cost benefit. They just can't seem to let it go. Once they've got it, it's like Hotel California. You can check in, you can never check out.
You can never leave. Right. So speaking of this in government, I think just maybe today, the Daily Wire is now suing the Biden administration over the sort of OSHA pushed vax.
We may have a friend of the show involved in that lawsuit.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
I think Harmeet is the one who filed that, if I'm not mistaken. Probably if I know we never like to wing it, but it seems to me that there's a very complex legal procedure that you have to go through on this, because there's so many people, I think, who have standing of, I believe it's over 100 employees in order to bring one of these actions.
Yeah, I was listening to Ben talk about launching the lawsuit a little earlier, and he brought up something interesting, which I brought up to Gary. But, if the government and the Biden administration was really interested in getting people vaccinated, which I believe they are, they would then enact this, which is nobody who's getting any government assistance shall continue to get government assistance unless you can prove you're vaccinated. So everyone who's on food stamp or welfare, and by the way, these are kind of the people that aren't getting vaccinated, just go ahead and go, we need a proof of your vaccination before we give you your next welfare check, which is the guy who's paying the taxes for the welfare checks. Sounds reasonable to me. If you want something from the government, then you got to give something to the government. I don't think they would ever touch that one, but it kind of then makes you go, well, why not? If you want everyone to get vaccinated, and this is a group that is at a lower, I would just guess that the average person on government assistance is probably at a lower vaccination rate than the general populace. Well, then require that they be vaccinated before you hand them another check from the government. They haven't done that. There's also been some union stuff that they're not getting near either because they don't want to do battle. They don't want to do battle with welfare people, and they don't want to do battle with union people, but they will certainly do battle with business.
Yeah, well, obviously anybody who contracts with the government is mandated, and that's where they're getting some of their pushback. I've seen various reports back and forth. Some reports I've read say, well, that the estimates of how many people won't do it and how you're going to lose a portion of your workforce is grossly exaggerated. But then I've seen other statements. In fact, the sheriff of LA County, Sheriff Villanueva, was saying, if push comes to shove, he's got, I forget the percentage, but a significant, not insignificant percentage of deputies who are at 28 plus years of service. And there would be no financial detriment to them just saying, buzz off, I'm not going to do it if he mandates it. And then you have other locations that are kind of bounty hunting, so to speak, saying, if you don't want to vaccinate at your place, come to us. And so it's an interesting push and shove or pushback from public, the public first responders, if you will.
Yeah, I think Governor DeSantis of Florida was saying, we'll give you $5,000, come over here and be a cop in Florida. So it's interesting. And, I think when the dust settles, you'll realize that one political party probably seized on COVID to try to make as much hay as they could out of it while the sun was shining. But then when inevitably happens is then the other group seizes on what you seized on, and then you get DeSantis or people moving to Florida or people moving out of California. So what do you think about the Daily Wire case?
I really wish she had filed it yesterday so I could have talked to her today about the legal machinations, because it's an interesting legal issue. Somebody's going to have to grapple with it at some point, meaning the judiciary. I think filed in California based on the failure, I think it was, I want to say in Massachusetts, but the failure to intervene on a religious basis. I don't think that it's going to pan out for them. And I'll tell you why. I mean, having been involved in much of the COVID litigation, and including the business interruption litigation and the government, the government shutdowns, if you will, I have rarely seen an issue where the courts have been almost uniformly in lockstep with mandates from the government. I think somebody had estimated on the business interruption that it was at 95%. I would estimate that it's probably at the same level when it comes to the mandates, both for shutting down businesses and things of that nature, probably hovering around there. And the only cases where there's been any traction has been on the religious issue. If there is a distinction between the secular and the religious, and Gorsuch has kind of led that rally on the U.S. Supreme Court, but certainly there's no wave of pushback on the lower courts so far. I mean, the one thing that I think they've got going for them is if there's no federal assistance tied to it. The mandate we were just talking about, where federal contractors are mandated. If you want to do business with the government, you have to have a vaccinated workforce. That has been, at least so far, upheld. And there's a belief that that businesses have wanted that. I think Gary sent me something did we just postpone the date for mandates, Gary?
I'm not sure if it was necessarily postponed because it had never been announced, but I have been following over the past few weeks that a lot of labor groups have been lobbying the Biden administration to make sure that the date for vaccination mandate is after the holiday season, because they were afraid of shipping shortages and just general workforce problems if we did it before then.
And
it was set as January 4th. So what I sent to Mark was, well, it looks like the lobbying worked, because sure enough, after the holidays.
Do you want to talk about the judge in the Rittenhouse case? Because
I do, because I thought he was channeling you when I saw this. Have you seen this little clip?
I saw the clip that was tweeted to me, and Gary said you wanted to bring it up on today's program.
Yes, I would like to bring it up, because I thought for a second that it was that Adam had, besides all of your other accolades, you are now a retired justice sitting by assignment.
Here's the judge, and I don't know who he's speaking to. He's speaking to the court. I was speaking. I think to the lawyers who are presumably at counsel table. Here it is.
So there's two different parts of the rule. One of them is the defendant has to have been aware of the decedent's violent acts or turbulent behavior. In the other one, it's circumstantial evidence of the victim's violent behavior at the time of the incident. That's what I admitted it on. Now, one of these, this was on CNN, Jeffrey Toobin and another attorney there, and the comment was made that the ruling was incomprehensible. And I think they obviously are not familiar with this rule. That's our law. That's the law in the Jackson case. It's the law in the case of the United States against Craig A. Smith, which is 230 Federal 2nd 300, 7th Circuit case.
So he said victim, by the way.
Yes, he did, because I think he was reading straight from the rule. Interestingly, as we discussed before, the fact is that, and this drives me crazy, I suppose, just because people opine on he's admitting this, he's admitting that, he's not doing this right. He's following what the law is. And what he did was he was looking down and reading the rule. So he's absolutely right that when somebody says his rulings are incomprehensible, maybe it's more obvious that they haven't read the rule. We have a similar rule, and he's talking about the federal law in his circuit as well.
What is he saying in that? Is he saying he was just talking about the past of the victim, as he called it? And what did he say? Or give us some clarity.
What he's saying, he said that he's admitting, or he's allowing the defense here to bring up the violent nature of what the complaining witness or decedents are doing. So you can talk about this idea that they are rioting or they are arsonists, or if there is circumstantial evidence of that. So if you, on the tape, if he sees the fact that there are people that are throwing objects, that are doing violence, or as he calls it, turbulence, even though turbulence is in the first part of the rule that he's not admitting it under. But he's talking about circumstantial evidence. The circumstantial evidence is just as good as direct evidence. But here, the direct evidence would be if you saw something. That's traditionally what is called eyewitness testimony. That's direct evidence. Circumstantial evidence could be he's seeing the building burning. He's seeing a car getting rolled over or something along those lines. Circumstantial evidence, I mean, they teach this at prosecutorial school 101. They always explain circumstantial evidence as if I see somebody come inside who's wearing a raincoat and they're wet, but I haven't been outside, that would be circumstantial evidence that it's raining outside. Is there another explanation for it? Sure, they could be wearing a raincoat and somebody was testing a fire hose or something like that. But is that reasonable? And then you get into how to weigh circumstantial evidence. What he's saying is if somebody is in an area where there are things going on that appear to be of a violent nature, does that give somebody or are you at least able to raise that issue as circumstantial evidence? And that's why when he's I understand what his frustration is. People are saying that's incomprehensible. I don't know who the other lawyer was with Tubin, but there's certainly the law of self-defense or defense of others, and you have to make a distinguishing separation between the two. But the law of self-defense is when do you escalate and to what level of force, and what can be thought of as a threat, and what is in the mind of the person who uses the force.
Well, I was just kind of thinking about this, but you can say about your victim that they were God-fearing, family-oriented, small business owner, community leader, and then they were struck down violently. Like, you're allowed to say good things about people, right?
Yes, because you would say that's not prejudicial.
Right,
well,
but
it is prejudicial to whoever it is. Like, it's damning by faint praise.
Well, you're trying to paint this picture. I mean, that's why they say it. Family man, God-fearing, mother of three, or whatever they do. Sort of by the same logic, you could say, ne'er-do-well, gang-affiliated, atheist. It just feels like you're trying to paint a picture of who the people are. All right, there's the DB out of the Raiders out of Nevada. I keep wanting to say Oakland Raiders.
Las Vegas Raiders.
Las Vegas Raiders. Gary was
it's another interesting case because the advantage, if there's ever any advantage when you're talking about horrible situations like this, is in Nevada, they struck down the idea of charging murder in these circumstances. So you can have, if it had been in California, you could have murder charges under the Watson theory. In Nevada, you cannot. You're limited to the manslaughter theory and the reckless theory of prosecution. I believe Dave Chesnoff, who just tried the Durst case along with Dick DeGuerin, is his lawyer there in Nevada. Chesnoff's a wonderful trial lawyer, and he's obviously got his hands full with this case because if you believe what's happening here, and what they're reporting, at least, they've alleging 156 miles per hour. They do that based on, you would know this better than anybody, but they're probably going over the black box that's in the car. I believe it was a late model, so they would have probably the ability to download the information and know exactly what was happening in the prior time.
I'll go a step further for you. Ace, as you know, it's a very late model Corvette, and those cars are actually designed so the user can easily download data because of track days and stuff like that. So they probably had a very simple time getting at that info.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because, I don't want to be slippery slope guy, but at least in California, they're talking about charging you for the amount you drive. They always bring up one of these ideas, which is if someone is driving a lot, we should sort of charge them by the mile, which is, my feeling with it's $6 a gallon for gas. People who drive a lot are paying a lot into the system, but they can get this information now, and it's good in a case like this because we get the official particulars. At some point, the download the black box could turn into you crossing over a magnetic strip on the 5, and if you exceeded 71 miles an hour, you may find a ticket in your mail. Everyone kind of goes, that's Orwellian, whatever. I don't know. There's no more arguments against Orwellian futuristic nonsense that can't happen anymore. I think we're kind of there. Look no further than vax IDs and mandates and cards to gain entry. They'll probably do it into airports and schools and everything else soon. But he was going like 156. I guess the impact was like 132 or 4.
127 was where he hit impact.
It seems incomprehensible that he's alive. People don't. That is an insane impact.
I was going to ask you because you obviously have seen it firsthand and have understand it. Is it? Even in the. It's I guess a testament to the Corvette or the engineering, but I don't know how it's possible you survived that impact.
Is it possible that it was a rear engine, because the newer Corvettes are mid-engine, so it would have a lot of crumple in the beginning?
Yeah, I'm also assuming, but I really don't know. If the RAV4 that the decedent young person, I think,
23,
was parked in, and Mark, I'm curious about the 23-year-old versus the 77-year-old, in terms of how that plays out in court, if it makes a difference or not. I'm going to ask you about that, but if that RAV4 is parked at a stoplight and you hit it at 127 miles an hour, that seems like just pure destruction. If the RAV4 was moving at 40 miles an hour and you hit it, that would suggest something else. But it would also kind of suggest that the RAV4 would tumble or something. And I don't know. I haven't seen, you hear rear end, you think one car stopped. But if you're doing 156 miles an hour, you'll come up on people doing 42 miles an hour pretty fast. And I don't know if anyone knows that. I'm going to get my first spot ready. But, Mark, I want to know, again, killing let's say the 23-year-old college student with a promising future versus, the 77-year-old Hispanic lady who's delivering newspapers at 5 a.m. I want to know how that factors into the courtroom. First, I'll tell you about relief ban. Motion sick from private jet travel. Yeah, Mark's probably been there a time or two. That can be a little bumpy, especially if you're on the small boy. Check out Relief Band, the #1 FDA-cleared anti-nausea wristband, clinically proven to relieve nausea and vomiting from motion sickness, morning sickness, chemotherapy, anxiety, hangovers, migraines, 100% drug-free, non-drowsy, fast-acting, all-natural relief with 0 side effects. Originally developed 20 years ago plus in hospitals. And it's now over-the-counter. Relief Band stimulates a nerve in your wrist.
How do you spell it?
You spell it relief, and band, as in B-A-N-D.
A-N-D.
Relief band. It stimulates a nerve in your wrist that goes to the part of your brain that controls nausea and blocks a signal to your stomach telling you to be sick. You can use it. I've used it for, it's good if you maybe had a few too many the night before and you're feeling a little nauseous the next morning. Car sickness, good for road trips. Newest model Relief Band Sport, waterproof, interchangeable bands, extended battery life. It's Relief Band, right, Gary?
That's absolutely right. As the holiday season quickly approaches, there's never been a better time to give the gift of relief and make sure your loved ones are nausea-free. Right now, Relief Band has an exclusive offer just for Reasonable Doubt listeners. If you go to reliefband.com and use promo code DOUBT, you'll receive 20% off plus free shipping and a no-questions-asked 30-day money-back guarantee. So head to RELIEFBAND.com and use our promo code DOUBT for 20% off plus free shipping.
So Gary can figure out whether the RAV4 was moving.
I've read 12 articles in the last few minutes. They all say that the front of his vehicle collided with the rear of her vehicle, but no one indicates whether or not it's known if she was moving. It says that both vehicles traveled over 500 feet after the crash, and I can tell you from the pictures I've seen that the RAV4 was on fire with all four tires on the ground.
Wow.
Yeah, 500 feet after that's a long way to skid if in fact you're parked at a signal. You could probably pull it off, but it seems like
unlikely.
Yeah, it seems like maybe she was motoring along and he came up on her. I'll tease this because we got to take a quick break, but the difference between 23-year-old woman even and 77-year-old decedent, we'll talk to Mark about that right after this break. RockAuto.com. Why spend 30 to 50%, even 100% more for the same parts that a chain store or dealership might have? Why spend so much there? Why not go to RockAuto.com? It's a family business serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. Go to RockAuto.com to shop for auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers, everything from engine control modules to brakes to motor oil, even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic car or your daily driver, get everything you need in a few clicks delivered direct to your door. Go to rockauto.com, see all the parts available for your car or your truck. Write doubt in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. An amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, back with Mark Garagos and the question posed.
Well, there's always going to be, never say always, but there are great distinctions that are made between age, earning ability, the comfort that you give to loved ones, the impact that you have in your amongst whether you're married, whether you have children, whether you're just starting off in life, whether you've got a bright future. All of those things are how you would build a case for damages. That's why I was a little kind of segue into and use it by example. There's been articles in the legal press questioning whether anybody would be successful in the Alec Baldwin case by bringing litigation. And then I saw Brian Panish's firm signed up the victim there, the decedent in that case, for a lawsuit. And there's a couple of things I would opine there. Number one, Brian gets great results. His firm gets great results, and they are going to paint a picture in that case of a woman, mother, wife, who had an incredibly bright future. And for those who are saying that the insurance policies are not going to cover it, I would beg to differ. I think that the insurance companies are going to try to pay off whatever I think it's a $5 million cap, and they're going to try to tender that very quickly to get off the hook and not be having to pay litigation costs And
so hold on. So that
okay.
they have $5 million worth of insurance.
On two different, I think it's two layers. I think that's with the excess.
And then sometimes the insurance companies will go, this isn't a $5 million case. This is a $2 million case. So we'll spend $1 million litigating and we'll come out, $2 million to the good. But in this case, they're going to go, here's your check.
Anybody, and I don't want to cast aspersions, but I've read articles with people suggesting the insurance companies are going to fight this. I just think that's folly. I think the insurance company is going to take a look here and say, on our best day, we have way too much risk and we're going to pay this off. We don't need to litigate the issues or anything of that nature, especially with an impending investigation that's going to develop all kinds of issues related to safety on the set. I don't think they want to be anywhere near that.
Well, I've heard a couple of things. One is her, the 24-year-old gun wrangler, for lack of a better term, her lawyer floated some sort of this was sabotage kind of theory, which seemed very bizarre to me. I'd love to hear what you thought about that. And the other one, and I always think of you, Mark, is, when Baldwin got stopped to do his roadside interview with the paparazzi, he said that we were a well-oiled machine, which now I feel like somebody on the other side is going to get hold of that we were a well-oiled machine and have a lot of questions about why were people quitting or walking off or firing guns, nearby.
There's going to be a gun oil pun, right?
Right, yeah. Right. So now I always think about you because Baldwin doing, impromptu roadside press conferences that live forever in the digital world. As a lawyer for Baldwin, you cannot be happy about that.
Yeah, and I anybody in his position has got to be devastated. Obviously, I mean, you've taken somebody's life of a family that you know. I mean, there's been pictures of him with the husband and the child, and presumably from before this happened. And I just can't even imagine. It's incomprehensible that you did this and took her life. So you've got that aspect of it. You have this aspect also of when you're a high profile person like him, who has weighed in on every kind of social and political issues, you're in the eye of a storm, and it takes all of your kind of mettle, if you will, to resist making statements, but you can't, because precisely, you often say it, there's kind of a litany of biggest hits that I will cite to clients about it never works out to your advantage. I know there is this urge to try to manage it, but we've talked about this endlessly, but you need to just put your head down and understand that sometimes there are things you just can't manage. Sometimes there are not ways to manage your way out of a situation like this other than to let time elapse. Also, presumably, whoever's defending him is running a parallel investigation to whatever the authorities are. And if you're running a parallel investigation, you want to know what the facts are. I mean, the armorer's lawyer is apparently suggesting that this might have been intentional. I agree with you. At first blush, you say to yourself, how could that ever be? Who would ever be that diabolical to have planted it to do a setup? But there also, you need to do an investigation as to why there is live rounds, or why are there live rounds on a set where you're going to be firing and doing other things. That seems that's incomprehensible to me as well. So between the two of those, it's quite a set of circumstances. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you understand, or you help me? How do you get live ammo onto a set? That just mind-boggling to me.
My take is, I don't know, Occam's razor or something, like sort of the simplest explanation is they're out in the middle of the desert. There's nothing to do. They're all bored as shit. One person says, we got a lot of downtime between setups or whatever. We're in the middle of nowhere. We got all these firearms. Let's have some Old West type fun and shoot at some cans that are on a fence or some version of that. That's probably the plausible, easy explanation to this. And then at some point, they realize, that the guns they're using aren't prop guns. They're guns that are actually functional. So they go, all right, well, let's have some fun during the downtime. I mean, I don't know. It'd be sort of like like if you shot a movie and it was filmed out in the middle of nowhere and the movie was kind of a Mad Max type movie and you had a bunch of dirt bikes and stuff like that. There's a pretty good chance that some of the crew guys during the downtime would go, I'm going to hop on one of the dirt bikes and kind of take it out. You pop a wheeler, have a good time with it. That I could see that happening. I
could absolutely see that happening. I just wonder if what you're describing is what happened. Is that also the reason that at least it's being reported? Like I say, you always caution as to what's being reported, but is that the reason that there were texts and emails suggesting that there was not enough safety protocols surrounding this thing? And then that takes you know what I mean?
It would make sense that if you were on a set where you saw some crew guys on the dirt bikes doing some donuts during the downtime, you might go, this is not protocol. Like, what are those guys doing there? This is not safe, or this is not protocol. So it sounds like I think, I don't always take the nefarious route. I'm just assuming they were bored. They were in the middle of, also people don't, when you're on a film set, there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of we got to reset. We got to relight, we're moving, whenever they're moving, the whole video village has to move. The whole lighting has to, you may have 3 hours of hanging out. These guys are in the middle of the desert. There's no mall nearby. They're just hanging out. So maybe that's what they did. Now, once you establish that, then it can get pretty easy to get the live round into the gun once you're using that gun to shoot the cans on top of the fence. But my question is, we're always talking about the clients, and you're always talking about the clients just need to zip it like Baldwin. What is the attorney for the gun handler floating the sort of nefarious theory, like this was sabotage? Somebody could have put that bullet in purposely. What is that? Why is that? Would you ever do that?
Yeah, I think that there is a belief by most people who look at what has been reported so far that she is in the crosshairs. I've said since day one of this that she faces the prospect of an involuntary manslaughter here, and so a one defense to that would be somebody who's trying to set her up. The setup is really kind of, I think part of the reason that it's hard to comprehend is because if you're mixing a live round in with others, you would be able to take a look and see that it did not have the head, and that is your job. I don't know, unless somebody was standing right there, loaded the live round in and handed it, and then tried to blame her. It doesn't make much sense. The kind of prophylactic nature of having somebody who is, as you called it, a wrangler, I call it an armorer, or what that designation is, to make sure that a live round doesn't get in. And so that's, I hate to say it, but it's kind of a Russian roulette theory, but I don't know how that passes muster.
Yeah, when she's in charge ultimately of checking the gun and checking the chamber, and even I've learned that the primer on a bullet versus the primer on a blank looks different. One of them is sort of dimpled or stamped or something. So one presumably with experience could even look at it while it was loaded in a revolver and see which primer. Even if you couldn't get a look at the front of the blank or the bullet, you could tell by the back if it was a blank or not. But yeah, she's going to have a difficult time because you could say somebody snuck live rounds onto the set. You could say somebody put a live round in the gun. But at some point, she hands the gun off to somebody, and she's in charge of vetting the gun and checking the gun. I'm still just curious why the attorney would bring that up. I mean, I heard what you said. It just felt, I don't know. Would that be something you would bring up?
I mean, I'm assuming that he has some kind of facts or belief, or that he's. I don't want to second guess. I rarely will just second guess in a situation like that, because if they're conducting their own parallel investigation, they may know things or have statements that they've taken from people that haven't been released publicly yet. Because remember, most of the stuff you hear that gets released generally is a law enforcement leak, or a law enforcement who has a symbiotic relationship with the media, because they're kind of the media is usually embedded with law enforcement. And so you may get a leak that is pro-prosecution, so to speak, and may not know some of the facts that the defense does. And so I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt at this point. Maybe by next episode, we can see if that lawyer wants to expound on why he did that. It might be a good topic for it beyond.
Well, Gary, the clip's on TMZ somewhere. We might be able to find it. I still circle back and say, even if he found something out with this parallel investigation, it still seems like an interesting piece of information to share publicly, even if there was something you knew that the public didn't know yet. And you're right, they conduct their own investigation. You know this. You've done it dozens and hundreds of times, where law enforcement does theirs, insurance does theirs, the defense and the prosecution does theirs, and everyone's doing an investigation simultaneously. But it just, and I'm sure he's going to try to connect some email where somebody said, like, I'm quitting, fuck you, I hope you die. You know what I mean? Into aha, or some version of that, which is always kind of funny to me when they try to get that tissue, that connective tissue between some fuck you, hope you die thing into this guy, had a hit, a plan, he's an assassin. He was, it was Day of the Jackal. You guys,
it's almost always in husband-wife or intimate partner style that they'll go back and there'll be a friend of the deceased who will say, I heard them arguing and you said I could blow your head off. And,
right.
It was 5 years before that. And so he was waiting until that moment to do it.
Yeah. Sort of famously, when Larry Elder was running for governor, an ex-girlfriend of his from 8 years ago or something announced that he pulled a gun out and waved it around, and she felt threatened. Like, there's always something out there. All right, Gary can look for that clip. Is there one more?
I have a clip here. It's a little long. I can't really watch it and edit it, so we can play it from the top, and you can call your own out if you'd like.
All right, let's see what the lawyer has to say. This is for the armorer.
What evidence do you have, because it's such a serious claim, that somebody, maybe a disgruntled crew member, whatever, that somebody may have actually done this sabotage knowing that it could kill somebody?
Well, I want to start from the idea that we don't have any one particular person. We're not identifying any particular person, but we are saying this. There was a box of dummy rounds. These dummy rounds were used to put into these guns for the set. In that box of dummy rounds, there was at least one live round, and we think more. And we think as the investigation proceeds, they're going to find more. So the question is, how did the live rounds get in there, and why were they in that box? There's no good explanation for why they should be mixed into a box with live rounds.
Where was the box of ammo? Was it with the weapons?
The guns were locked up in a safe that 3 people had the code, had access to. The ammunition boxes were not locked up and were frequently out. And here's why. No one assumed or thought or conceived of the idea that there could be live rounds on the set.
Is that common, though, that the ammunition is not?
But the problem with this attorney is the next question should be, well, someone may have put the live rounds into the ammunition box, but isn't your client in charge of the ammunition box? Like, why did they leave it
That's
unattended?
what I don't. And how do you pull? If somebody, there's a box, did your client actually, your client the one who actually picked it up and placed the live round in? That does not absolve or break the chain of potential liability.
What do you think about lawyers going on TMZ and sort of pleading half of their case? They're not dumb. They're strategic, but
right. I understand that and been there, done that. But you should understand, Harvey normally is not going to give you a pass, and has been practicing law for as long as I have. Although he's not active in a courtroom, but certainly has watched enough trials and knows enough to ask questions. And that, I don't think, at least was helpful, except who knows? Maybe they have, and I wish, like you had just asked, the next question, are you saying your client was the one who picked up the live round out of the ammo box and loaded the gun?
yeah, and again, if you're in charge, why was the ammo box just left lying around? That's your client who's in charge, presumably, of the ammo box. It's very sort of, hey, my client's the captain of the Titanic. Why did you hit the iceberg? It's like, you can't really. He's the captain. He runs that vessel. It seems weird that that's her title, and that somehow he's trying to get her away from that. But it'll be very interesting. So your prediction is the insurance company cuts a check, but the decedent's lawyers aren't going to be done there, right?
No, I don't think so. What's been reported would hardly cover the damages in a case like this. So there'll be a dance of some kind.
Then they go to the producers. They go after Baldwin as a producer.
Correct. And presumably he has a personal umbrella policy, which he probably has tendered. It's going to be all kinds of insurance that's going to be in play on this.
So they're going to go. They go for the insurance for the production. You have to be insured. This is why, certain actors, famously, who had difficulties with substance and things of that nature, couldn't get insured. For instance, before you start a TV show production, I've done this more than once. You go to a doctor who's basically the herpes doctor. She's this little old lady in Hollywood, and she wants to make sure you don't have herpes, or you're not going to get herpes, or have a herpes outbreak in the middle of production, because the insurance company, you're going to have to stop if you get a big cold sore on your lip. And they have to have her sign off before the insurance company will sign off. So it's interesting. So all these productions are insured. They go after the insurance company for the production. That's low-hanging fruit. That's A, number one. But then you got the Baldwin and whatever fortune he has and whatever umbrella policy he has for that. Then you go after other producers. Then, you go after everyone's insurance. Is that what you're saying, essentially?
Yeah, my guess is, I haven't talked to anybody, so I'm just basing it on experience. My guess is they cast a very wide net in this case, because the current policy, if it's reported, it's accurate, seems woefully inadequate in a case like that.
At $5 million. At
$5 million.
And morbidly circling back to young, female, family, future. not not a janitor who was in the building on 9/11.
It's always a very I don't know how to characterize it. Characterize it as it's somewhat ghoulish, but it has to be done. That's the only way you can measure or quantify it.
All right, Mark, I know you have a hard out, so I'll
I do. I appreciate it.
And
thank you very much,
take over
Adam.
from
Talk
here.
to you, Gary.
All right, I'll tell
you,
you guys about Geico. Do you own, do you rent your home? Well, you do one or the other, and then there's your automotive policy. How about you get your bundle working when you take your automotive and or your homeowners or renters insurance and bundle it up? Geico makes it easy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. So go to geico.com, get a quote, and see just how much you could save and just how easy it is to get your bundle working at Geico. That is geico.com. All right. We're sold out in Baltimore, but still some tickets left this Saturday, Glenside, Pennsylvania, a little outside of Philly, at the Keswick Theater. I'll be there doing stand-up and saying hi after the show. You can go to AdamCarolla.com for all the live shows, and you can check out our YouTube page. Subscribe to Reasonable Doubt YouTube channel.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast, only place you can watch Reasonable Doubt and Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. And you can also check out our Chassis channel on Pluto TV. That's CHASSY, channel 687. So, till next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garrigus saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.